As is the case with a lot of people, I too enjoyed Shadowbringers. The direction it went to was a breath of fresh air, and it has been given a lot of praise for its amazing story. Matter of fact, I remember watching the results of a poll asking Japanese Final Fantasy fans what their favorite characters from the franchise were, and what shook me personally was the fact that Imacuttlefish was ranked number 6 on the villains ranking poll, up there with, you know, iconic villains like Kefka, Guja, Sephiroth, Golbez, etc, etc. Now, if you only played FF14, this may not seem like such a big deal to you, but these old quote-unquote golden era Final Fantasy titles have become so well respected within the FF community that it's hard to, you know, even compete against them. You know, they have like this kind of, I guess they call it like cult following. There's also a stigma when it comes to the MMO FF titles, those being obviously 11 and 14, where a lot of fans don't consider them, I guess you could call, they don't consider them canon. Like they often don't consider like their characters or stories when they like rank things in the franchise, for example, because they are online experiences. That stigma isn't as strong as it used to be, however it's still definitely around, and for reference I too used to think that way before I got myself into FF14 recently. Thanks to the massive success of Shadowbringers, I would say a lot of fans are reconsidering that stance, as more and more players experience and enjoy the story that FF14 has to offer. Now, I'm basically saying that Imacuttlefish ranking that high among 500,000 or so Japanese Final Fantasy fans is a very impressive feat, and it speaks to the success of the storytelling in Shadowbringers. And trust me, I do want to make a video about Imacuttlefish eventually as well. However, today I am instead going to talk about another of my favorite characters in Shadowbringers, that being Ryne. What I find odd about Ryne is that I don't see too many people talk about her story in Shadowbringers. You know, people sing praise about how well Imacuttlefich's morality was made, or Arbert's tragic story, or, you know, Gratia just being Gratia. While these three were definitely crucial additions to the cast in Shadowbringers, and yes, I know they were all introduced prior to Shadowbringers, but their involvement really only comes in with this expansion. I feel a lot of people sleep on how important the addition of Ryne was to the success of 5.0 as well as the subsequent Eden Raid series, which is still ongoing during the making of this video. Ryne is also an important character since, along with the other characters that I mentioned, or among the other characters I mentioned I should say, she's designed to be a character to get you emotionally invested into the first, and, you know, have a connection to this new world. Ryne is an interesting character since we can have pretty much full insight into how she was raised. In fact, the effects of a parenting figure is a central theme of her character. That's why in this video a great deal of focus is going to be going into the psychology behind parenting. This is of course a very complicated topic, and I'm obviously not an expert on parenting myself personally, but I'm just going to focus on the bits that are relevant to her character. Let's start off by trying to find which parenting style can most accurately be applied to Ryne by looking at her behavior in game. Now, obviously we don't see in game how exactly she was raised by Ranjit. However, we get a really good picture, and it's made clear already in both in the first confrontation against Ranjit, as well as the first time we meet Ryne. When Thancred is fighting Ranjit, Ranjit proclaims to Thancred that he isn't quote worthy of the Oracle, unquote. The obvious takeaway here is that he is referring to her as the Oracle, that is to say her title and not Midfilia, her name. So already with this we can infer that the way Ranjit was raising her was more in a strict business sort of sense, with no regard to the child's feelings. This would then very much fall in line with an authoritarian type of parent. This point gets confirmed more and more as we proceed through the story, and of course we find more about Ranjit's mindset. And this first confrontation really doesn't say that much at all, but I'm just bringing this up to say that it's worth noting that the seeds were already planted, you know, in this very first confrontation against him. Likewise, our first meeting with Ryne points us in the same direction.
So, Minfilia. What made you leave Thancred behind, if you don't mind me asking?
You. The hero from another world. I was asleep when I felt it. A presence. Someone I was meant to meet. They were close and I knew I had to go to them. But with all the commotion in Lakeland, I was afraid that Thancred wouldn't let me.
And would I have been wrong? Had I arrived a moment later, you would be back in your cell in Yulmore. And now we have Ranjit snapping at our heels. You really have outdone yourself this time.
I'm sorry. Thank you for saving me.
Notice that she does not speak in this scene until specifically addressed by Alice. She then really struggles to express herself, and eventually when Thancred scolds him, she immediately conforms and becomes obedient. Shyness, bad social skills, low self-esteem, conforming easily. These are all traits found very commonly in children raised by authoritarian parents, and all of these traits will continue to be shown throughout the story. Just with this short introduction to Ryne, we already know so much about her relationship to both Ranjit and Thancred. And don't worry, Thancred is going to be a big focus in this one as well. Another important trait to note is that since children raised in these kinds of environments are not encouraged to act independently, it can very easily lead to them having trouble making their own choices. This trait can be seen strongly in Ryne, and it's a crucial part of her character arc.
Minfilia, once we set forth, we are not like to return for some while. If thou wouldst choose tomes to take with thee, let it be now.
Really? May I?
Of course, my dear. Yet have care thou dost not add overmuch to thy burden, lest I incur Thancred's ire.
We see her be, really delighted that both Urianger and Thancred approve of her being able to pick any book. This is because to her it's a big deal to have so many choices, even if it's something as simple as picking a book to read. It's also why Minfilia in the Echo cutscene is emphasizing repeatedly that Ryne becoming a quote Master of Destiny and quote must come of her own volition. This gives us a very clear-cut message right from the get-go that it's important for Ryne to learn to make her own decisions, and this point will be hammered a lot throughout the story, and I'll be pointing them out as we go.
Tell me, what must I do to bring you back?
My dearest Thancred, as I am now, I am no different from an Ascian. This child is but a vessel. One of many I have used that I might spread word of her enduring blessing and preserve the flame of hope. In my name, each has died, never having lived her own life. I have taken enough from these children. I will take no more.
But what of your suffering? Your sacrifice? This isn't fair! I will not stand for it. I cannot! There must be something we can do. Tell me!
Should the day come when this child grows weary of fighting and wishes to cast it all aside, then shall I take up her burden. But should she wish instead to become the master of her own destiny, then shall I bequeath to her my all. Imbued with the strength that I reserve for rebirth, she may come to wield my powers as her own.
And what of my wishes? What of Flamine's? What of all the people who love and care for you and want nothing more than to see you again?
It is not their decision to make. It is hers. This child's. This Minfilia's. You have ever watched over me, Thancred. Now I ask that you do the same for her. Protect her. Teach her. Stand by her as you stood by me. There is much and more she does not know. She needs a guide to show her the ways of the world, or she will never find her own path. When the time comes, you will find me here. Until that day.
Minfilia, wait!
What happened?
Now let's talk about Thancred, because you might be saying, well, isn't Thancred acting like an authoritarian parent in these scenes too? Well, yes, and it's worth noting that parenting isn't as easy as us clumping it all into one category. As I said, it's more complicated than that. It's more like a spectrum, and Thancred by nature is very much warm and accepting, as we can see with his relationship to Minfilia in 1.0. However, these traits are conflicted by his still lingering trauma from how he failed Minfilia in his eyes, causing him to be constantly pushing Ryne away. This constant sort of tug of war between his kind and caring aspect versus him trying to push her away is essentially the center of his character, his character's theme throughout 5.0, until he manages to confront and overcome those painful feelings. I also want to mention that there is very much an equivalent to this that happens commonly in real life, which is of course when two parents have very different methods of raising their child, which can obviously be damaging to a child. Of course, Ryne isn't a child by age in this case. However, we can infer that despite her being around the same age as the twins, she's a lot less developed due to the nature of her birth. That's what makes the dynamic between Ryne and Thancred so cool as a character idea, where we are seeing Ryne slowly opening up and learning to deal with her personality, brought by her upbringing, and we see Thancred learning to confront his fears and become a good parent to her. Of course, in reality, this kind of relationship will take months, if not years, to heal. But you know, it's a video game and we're kind of limited by how much story we can tell here.
Oh, thank goodness. There you are. Those Numo were rather frightening. I'm glad you're safe. I haven't seen much actual combat, so I was a little nervous, but I'm happy I could help. The Minfilius before me battled Sin Eaters as part of the Yulmoran army. But that had all changed by the time I was found. They held me captive, so that I wouldn't follow in the others' footsteps. I'd still be in my cell now had Thancred not spirited me away. When he found me, I knew nothing of the world. I didn't know how to live, let alone fight. Thancred once told me that if the efforts to summon you failed, it would fall to me to face the Light Wardens. I realized then that it was the only reason he kept me close, as a contingency. The truth is, he can't stand to be around me. Because I'm not her. I'm not his Minfilia. Once, we journeyed to Nabatha together, to the place where the Oracle appeared and stayed the flood. As we drew near, I felt as though I was fading away. I shut my eyes and covered my ears, and then... I'm not sure what happened after that. I have a vague feeling that I said something to him. Only it wasn't me at all. It was her. Afterwards, Thancred didn't say a word. Only kept to himself and brooded. There's nothing I can do for him. Nothing I can offer but my presence, though it only reminds him of his loss. She should be the one to live on. That's why I tried to find you, because I knew that was what she wanted. But now that you're here, I'm not entirely sure what it was she intended me to do. Was I meant to tell you something, or bring you to someone, or somewhere? I can feel the answer at the edge of my mind, just out of reach.
Damn, rewatching this scene really hit me hard. The point of this scene is to show how low Ryne's self-esteem really is at this point. The constant feel of guilt that she is causing grief to Thancred is amplifying that feeling of worthlessness even more. Combine that with the fact that she's essentially still a child with hardly any experience about the real world, and the fact that she's carrying a very big burden. You know, think about what she just said, like how devastating would this be to an actual child. I'm very confident in saying that if she didn't have the support net of friends that she has throughout Shadowbringers, it's very likely that she would become overburdened by these thoughts, and this kind of thinking could easily lead anyone to bad things such as self-destructive thoughts.
Minfilia, willful child. How many times must I come to collect you?
I won't return to Yulmor. And I won't let you hurt my friends.
What is this stance? Where did you learn it? No oracle I trained would make such an unseemly show of herself. Know your shame, gal. You're powerless. You have no life nor purpose, save that which our master sees fit to permit.
Who are you to dictate her purpose? To lock her away and deny her a life? If she was powerless, it's because of you, you sanctimonious swine. But no longer.
Fool! Defiance only begets more suffering. It is through acceptance alone that one may find solace in this god's-forsaken world.
Here we start to really see the tension between Thancred and Ranjit, and again more demonstration of what kind of parenting comes from Ranjit. Only now Ryne, starting to grow attached to the party, has the courage to defy him. We also gain insight into why Ranjit takes this approach towards Ryne. You see, a lot of people assume that Ranjit raised her like that because of duty or whatnot, but I personally think it's a product of the kind of world he grew up in. He's saying to Thancred essentially that you shouldn't defy and keep suffering and instead obey. That's him calling out to Thancred that in his mind, his way of parenting is superior, because he genuinely believes that it's the best for her. Yes, you can say he's just evil and he was doing it because he was ordered to do so, but I like to view it more from a human motivation perspective instead of her there, he's just evil. Don't get me wrong though, Ranjit is still very much a bastard, but at least we gain a little insight into his outlook on the world here. Ranjit also works really well as an antagonist to Thancred, because he's a manifestation of all the traits inside Thancred caused by his pain that he's trying to confront and erase so that he could be a better parent figure to Ryne.
I must say, Ishtola, while most of us have struggled to come to terms with our altered circumstances, you seem to have adapted rather well.
Lest you forget, Master Matoya and I dedicated our lives to uncovering the truth which hides at the heart of our world. Though separate, the fate of this reflection is nevertheless bound to that of our home. That I would be daunted by such an invaluable opportunity is absurd. But what of you, Thancred? Could it be that you are still struggling to come to terms with the nature of your young companion?
My struggles are none of your concern. Quite why you would speak thus and in this company, I do not know. Perhaps you left more of yourself back in the source than I assumed. If you'll excuse me.
He understands that I'm not the same, that I'm not her.
Understands, perhaps, but does not accept. The question being whether he ever will. And whether you will, more importantly. As difficult as your circumstances may be, they are yours, not his. 'Tis you and you alone who bears ultimate responsibility for your life. But you need not make any hard choices now. Why not go and get some fresh air, clear your head?
This scene again fleshes out Thancred's internal conflict. The way Y'shtola ridiculed him, you can tell it hurt him a lot, and it should, because it's the truth. As I mentioned before, Thancred is constantly struggling between showing his true feelings along with compassion towards Ryne, and while at the same time pushing her away because he's running from his past instead of confronting it. It also shows how aware the other Scions, or at the very least Y'shtola and Ryne, are of Thancred's internal conflict, as they should, because they were there to witness his relationship to Minfilia and understand it's hard for him to let go. The difference just is that unlike Ryne, and to an extent the Warrior of Light, who prefer to approach Ryne in an effort to help their turmoil relationship, Ustonga takes a more direct approach by confronting Thancred himself. This of course makes Thancred just double down and retreat even further into his shell, but it does affect him regardless, since her words certainly put some doubts into his head. And it's emphasized again by Ustonga that Ryne needs to grow independent and to be able to make her own choices. This scene is really important for both Thancred and Ryne.
You might not deliver her to the heavens, but if you could deliver the night sky to her people, the real night sky, it would be the next best thing. Their prayers would finally be answered. They could gaze up at the firmament and see their ancestors in every twinkle of the stars. We cannot allow their hopes and dreams to drown in the light. We have to bring back the dark. If we don't, who will? Forgive me, thinking of all those we have lost.
No, it's all right. We will bring back the dark.
Mayhaps sooner than later, in fact.
First we see Ryne becoming even more confident thanks to her bonds with the group, and you know, through that trust she's able to speak up what's on her mind. And we still see her low self-esteem and conforming nature come into play when she realizes at the end of her speech that she may have stepped out of the line. But instead of shutting her down, Thancred shows compassion toward her. This is definitely a big win for both characters. See what I mean? How they work dynamically? It's some awesome writing, honestly. This scene is a big turning point for Ryne.
Possible lead. An abandoned mine in Western Amareng. From what the Maud told me, it would be a perfect place to stay out of sight. Of course, I could never hope to explore such a labyrinth quickly or safely on my own, so I returned here.
Even should we all join in the endeavor, an exhaustive search could take weeks, and with no guarantee of finding anything.
The Wardens harbor vast reservoirs of primordial light, do they not? Far beyond anything found in lesser sin-eaters. And isn't it true that the Oracle could see the light of a sin-eater from miles away? Surely a Warden would seem like a blazing beacon by comparison. To the real Oracle of Light, I mean. The real Menphilia. If we travel to Amareng, to the south where she halted the flood, I could summon her back. What do you think?
Don't.
Don't what? Do what I can. What we both know is right.
Do not presume to know my mind. You have no idea what you're proposing.
But I do! I know why you never said anything. Because you thought you could keep me safe by keeping me in the dark. And maybe I thought so too. But I knew, Thancred. I always knew.
Oh, I see. I thought you were a rather underwhelming reincarnation. But it all makes sense now. The Oracle lies dormant within you, doesn't she? But to draw on her true power, you must become one, both body and soul. To wit, one being must consume the other. Who shall be the lucky winner?
This doesn't concern you, Ascian.
but it plainly concerns you. Which is why your heart is ready to burst out of your chest. Despite the raging tempest in your bosom, however, you have never once opened up to your young charge. Now, why would that be? Love.
After all this time, being accompanied by a lot of friends she could trust, friends that she has a genuine bond with, she is able to gather the courage and finally make a decision fully of her own volition, a big decision. She offers to go to Amarang to awaken to her oracle powers, fully aware that she can cease to exist in the process. She feels so strongly that for the first time, when Thancred refuses her, she fires straight back at him. But of course Thancred responds to her proposal with fiery defiance. After all, he is finally beginning to trust in her. Why would he risk losing her now too? The messed up thing here, of course, is that after running from having to confront Minfilia for so long and growing to trust Ryne, he now runs from the fear of losing her as well. I can't even imagine how grueling Thancred's mental struggles are for him throughout 5.0. Side note, when Imacuttlefish says love, there's a common misconception within the community that Thancred was infatuated with Minfilia. Hence, when Imacuttlefish says love, it implies that he can't let go of his romantic feelings towards Minfilia. This is so basic that I can't believe I'm having to point this out, but I will do it anyway for the sake of clarity. The love between Thancred and Minfilia was never romantic, and the love Imacuttlefish refers to here isn't romantic either. It refers to Thancred loving Ryne, again not romantically, which, similar to with Y'shtola earlier, hurts Thancred because it's the truth, and it's him suppressing those feelings toward her. Though this one is even worse since it comes from Imacuttlefish. I really wanted to show these 3 scenes without commentary instead of talking over it, but I decided to just have a quick rundown of what happens instead. First, we have this really touching moment where Thancred sees Magnus drinking next to a grave and decides to console him. But in seeing someone else wallow in sorrow, Thancred becomes conscious of his dilemma between wanting to be compassionate toward Ryne, but also pushing her away to mourn Minfilia. This is where he starts to actively think about these conflicting feelings that he has going on.
But I finally had a family. And then I robbed a young girl of hers. I did my best to make amends, to offer her comfort. But the more I look back on it, the more I realize just how inadequate my efforts were. I let her down. That is why I refuse to let her legacy die. In the end, all we can do is press on, for those we have lost, for those we can yet save.
After which we see Thancred opening up to the main character and finally gains the courage to overcome his painful past, with Minfilia driven by a passion to not fail Ryne as he did Minfilia.
She was something of a miner. After her father died, Flamine took her in and taught her the trade. I think they were both seeking to fill the void left by a loved one. Maybe that's why she took to it so readily. Back in those days, I spent most of my time in the quicksand, or some other tavern, loosening tongues and gathering secrets. Occasionally, I'd catch a glimpse of her in the street, on her way home after another hard day's work. I always felt a wave of relief when I saw she'd come back safe, along with a pang of guilt at the fact I wasn't there to support her as I should have been. Simply speaking with her more than once in a blue moon would have been a good start. I could never bring myself to do it. Instead, I threw myself into my work and became every drunkard's best friend. Far from it, and Flamine has never let me live it down. But that was a lifetime ago. Here and now I have another chance to do things right, and I will not squander it again.
What troubleth thee, child?
I shouldn't be here. I don't deserve to be. I don't deserve any of the things you've done for me. I'm just a burden, helpless and hopeless. If tomorrow came and I was gone, it would be better for everyone. Thancred most of all. He'll never admit it, but I can see it in his eyes. I wish he'd just say it. Just say that he hates me, that he wishes I was dead so that she could return.
None of this is thy doing, child.
Ryne, swayed by grief around her, loses her composure and loses all self-esteem again. Remember what I said about the scene in Il Meg? That she's just a child with a lot of burden of responsibility as well as an image of self-loath, and how that could be very dangerous. Again, I just want to point out, if she didn't have her friends who actually cared for her, she would have probably be going down a very dark path, with all things considered. And once again, Urianger stating that she has to move on and walk her own path. Also, this whole scene and her saying her goodbyes and thanking Urianger afterwards is definitely one of the most wholesome moments in all of Shadowbringers.
Had you only sworn fealty to Lord Vorthry, you'd have no cause to skulk about like frightened animals. You will remain as you are, while I dispatch these villains.
No, I won't. I won't let you.
You forget to whom you speak. Who armed you, trained you, fought and killed 1,000 sin-eaters with you. And when you were inevitably cut down and lay lifeless in my arms, who sought out your successor to carry on the futile struggle again and again? We seek to bring peace to what is left of this shattered land, while these mad fools would only bring further chaos down upon us. Do not be deceived, child. Only by Lord Vorthry's hand will this dying world know a sliver of salvation.
I don't know about the world, but I never asked to be saved. However much it hurts, and however hard it gets. It's my life, and I want to live it on my own terms! And those mad fools you want me to abandon, the ones I've traveled with, fought with, and may one day die with, they feel the same. So no, I will not be deceived, no matter what you say. I refuse to believe it's all for nothing. They're everything to me. All I have, and all I need. And I would gladly do anything for them. Let us pass, or kill me. I'm not leaving here without them.
How dare you! Very well. If you would cast your lot with villains, then you shall share their fate.
heard what you said, and I'm sorry for all the things I've left unspoken.
You have to go, now!
Thancred, no!
Go! Do what you came here to do. I'll not have you waste that newfound resolve on me.
I leave her in your hands.
Hurry! Not another step. Your fight is with me. You think yourself a protector? As if a whelp like you could be a better father to her than me.
Here we see Ranjit's line of thinking even more. Putting this and the last scene together, we can conclude that the reason he was raising Ryne in such an authoritarian manner was because of the pain caused by him losing prior incarnations of her. I forgot to mention this, but authoritarian parenting is rarely like a conscious choice that you actually want your child to turn out that way, because the effects of that kind of parenting are usually very bad. As mentioned earlier, it's usually a byproduct of something bad happening to the parent that causes them to you know, behave that way, and then, you know, kind of pass on that behavior to the child they're raising. Anyway, it's here where Ryne's arc starts to come full circle. She confronts Ranjit directly, essentially shrugging off all the marks left by his parenting, because she had friends to get her out of those bad traits inherited from Ranjit's parenting. It's also here where Thancred finally makes that choice to stop running, and full knowing that fighting Ranjit might cost him his life, he does it to give Ryne a future, so she can see her resolve through. The conflict between Thancred and Ranjit also comes full circle here. Again, this fight is very much metaphorical. It's a battle between which parenting ideology should prevail. This is made obvious with both Ranjit's comment right before the fight and after the fight. And as I said before, Ranjit is also very much a fitting antagonist for Thancred, since he represents the aspects that Thancred doesn't want to become when taking care of Ryne. Hence, him defeating Ranjit basically signals that he's come full circle. He overcame his fears internally by finally learning to accept him failing Minfilia, and externally by defeating Ranjit. This is of course topped off with the game showing us him overcoming his internal conflict, and it's implied that he seems to be ready to die happy now.
One last time, with a little help. I'm so proud to have been a part of your life. Oh, Minfilia.